I was evicted from land that the HOA didn't even own. Linda Morrison was that crazy. 12 families had already been evicted by this woman due to differences in grass height and paint colors. She now wanted my 50-acre property demolished because my chickens degraded the aesthetics of the surrounding area. Half a mile separated her and her HOA. 6 months later, she was pleading with me not to take everything from her while on her knees in a lawyer's office. How can the most powerful HOA president in Texas be overthrown by a broke veteran with 500 chickens? Please let me know where you're watching from in the comments before I share this crazy story with you. Some of you probably have terrifying HOA stories of your own. One of the most depressing days of my life was supposed to be the morning I arrived at Paradise Ranch. Grandpa Rivers, who reared me when I returned from Iraq broken, was just buried. He left me, and now I stood in front of the ranch. I didn't anticipate inheriting the acreage and 500 chickens. 500. They were everywhere, roosting in the trees, pecking about the old barn, and being commanded by the most amazing rooster I had ever seen. In honor of the general, Grandpa had given him the name Patton. That bird, I swear, gave me the impression that he was assessing a fresh recruit. The ranch itself had a rustic, genuine beauty that only comes from decades of hard work. Grandpa constructed a simple farmhouse on 50 acres of Texas land in the 1950s using his own hands, views to the horizon and a number of poultry coops. Those first 2 days were spent simply strolling around the farm, thinking back to all the summers I had spent here as a child and the times Grandpa had taught me about life when we were mending fences or feeding the chickens. When I returned from my second tour with PTSD so severe that I was unable to sleep without nightmares, he had truly saved my life. He had told me that the hens needed routine. Water them, feed them, and converse with them if you'd like. Damned. If he wasn't right, they'll teach you to live in the moment. When all else had failed to bring me calm, the birds had. I came onto something intriguing while using an old survey map to verify the boundaries of the properties. There was absolutely no HOA jurisdiction over the ranch. Willow Creek Estates, the closest development, was more than half a mile away. I was kneeling by my grandfather's grave in the ranch's little family cemetery on my 3rd day there, promising to look after his birds when I heard automobile doors slamming. When I looked up, I saw a woman in her 50s, dressed in a business suit that probably cost more than I made in a month at my previous work in logistics, strutting towards me as if she owned the place. A nervous-looking man, who I guessed was her husband, was behind her, jogging almost to keep up with her power walk. "I'm Linda Morrison," she said, before I had a chance to get to my feet. "Willow Creek Homeowners Association President. I assume you are the new owner." She had such a phony smile that it could as well have been plastic. "Mason Rivers," I uttered, carrying the bouquet I had bought for Grandpa's tomb. "Well, Mason," she went on, ignoring the fact that I was actually visiting a grave, "I'm here to discuss your options. You can sell this farm to our development group for $200,000, which is very generous considering the condition it's in." Or she paused dramatically, like she was delivering a death sentence. "Or what?" I asked, feeling my marine instincts kicking in. Something about this woman set off every alarm bell in my head. "Or I will make your life here absolutely unbearable," she said, still smiling, that plastic smile. "You see, your property may not technically be within our HOA, but it falls within what we call our aesthetic impact zone. Those chickens, that rusty barn, those overgrown fields, they're destroying our property values. We have ways of dealing with neighbors who don't cooperate." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the anger that I'd worked so hard to control in therapy. But I was standing at my grandfather's grave, and I could almost hear his voice. Don't let them see you sweat, boy. So I took a deep breath and said, as calmly as I could manage, "Mum, this is private property, my property, and you're trespassing." Linda's smile eventually faded as she growled, "I've been president of this HOA for 8 years, and you have no idea who you're dealing with. I suggest you leave before I call the sheriff. I've cleared this area of lots of issues. You're just another redneck who doesn't understand how things work around here." That's when Patton decided to make his entrance. The rooster came strutting around the corner of the barn like he'd been waiting for his cue, feathers gleaming in the morning sun. He took one look at Linda and apparently decided he didn't like what he saw. With a battle cry that would have made his namesake proud, Patton charged. Linda shrieked and stumbled backward in her high heels, arms windmilling as she tried to keep her balance. Her husband, Robert, tried to play hero, stepping between his wife and the rooster, but Patton was having none of it. He flew up, wings spread wide, and Robert had to literally pick Linda up and carry her back to their Mercedes while Patton pursued them like a feathered fury. I know I shouldn't have laughed, but watching the president of the HOA being carried away from my property by her husband while a rooster chased them was exactly the kind of cosmic justice Grandpa would have loved. Just as their car peeled out of my driveway, spitting gravel, Deputy Johnson pulled up in his patrol car. He stepped out, took one look at Patton, strutting back victorious, and shook his head with a grin. "Let me guess," he said. "Linda Morrison?" I nodded, and he sighed. She called in a complaint about being threatened. "But between you and me, that woman's been terrorizing folks around here for years. Just watch yourself, Mason. She doesn't like being told no." As he drove away, I noticed my elderly neighbor Betty Williams walking over from her property line. She was carrying what looked like a casserole dish and had worry written all over her face. "Mason, honey," she said with a voice that resembled my maternal grandmother. She paused and looked back towards the location where Linda's car had vanished, before giving me an old manila envelope along with the casserole. "That woman has driven 12 families out of their homes over the years. She's got methods, legal and otherwise," she said. "It was said to give it to you in case Linda ever came sniffing around. This time might be different. Your grandpa left this with me. Call that lawyer friend of yours from the Marines and see what's inside. You will require him." I didn't freak out when I got the official notification with 247 HOA violations. I actually spit coffee all over violation number 156 because I was laughing so hard. Community norms were visually disrupted by chickens that were seen moving anti-clockwise. This isn't anything I made up. Evidently, Linda Morrison had devoted hours to recording every conceivable infraction she could think of, some of which were completely ridiculous. My roosters were allegedly crowing outside of the permitted agricultural hours on a ranch that had existed before her priceless HOA was even constructed, according to violation number 1. According to violation number 89, Willow Creek Estate's air quality was being harmed by the organic fertilizer odor coming from my chicken coops. However, violation number 200 was my particular favorite. The owner of the property acted in a menacing manner towards HO. That one had a badly edited video in which she had removed the scene in which she had initially threatened me. My old Marine friend Bradley Stone, who had turned to law following his tours, was the first person I called. In addition, he ran a legal channel which would be useful in the future. He laughed for 5 minutes straight as I read him some of the infractions on the phone. He wheezed, anti-clockwise foul. "This is either a deliberate attempt to drown you in paperwork or the product of a true madman, Mason. Most likely, both. Tomorrow I'll be traveling from Dallas. Linda, however, wasn't satisfied with simply sending documents. I discovered that my electricity had been interrupted when I got up the following morning. It was scheduled maintenance, according to the power utility. It's odd, though, that in July, when temperatures in Texas reached 105 degrees, only my property lost power. My 500 chickens were stuck in coos that were turning into ovens in no time. I spent the next 6 hours doing what felt like a combat operation, carrying water from my well by hand because the electric pump wasn't working, and relocating chicks in groups of 20 to areas that were shaded. I essentially converted my ranch into a camp for chicken refugees by setting up tarps and battery-operated fans that I had hurriedly purchased from the hardware shop. I was worn out and covered in perspiration by the time I had shifted the final bunch, but the majority had been spared by me. Nevertheless, the heat killed 50 birds. Because Linda Morrison wanted to play games, she gave 50 innocent chicks. Patton stood watch as I buried each one, as if he realized we had lost guys in combat. Deputy Johnson happened to drop by that evening with his truck loaded with 20 gallons of water. "Strangest thing," he remarked, avoiding eye contact. I had a strong thirst while I was leaving for home. I bought a lot of water, but I can't seem to drink it all. Would it be okay if I left some here? An hour later, Betty Williams arrived with a homemade dinner and a story that infuriated me. 3 streets over, my son Tom once owned a charming thousands on lawyers, but she had connections with 3 judges. Eventually, he just gave up, sold the house for half what it was worth. The buyer, a company called Paradise Development LLC. Guess who owns that? She didn't need to tell me. This wasn't just about control. It was about money. That's when Rosa Martinez knocked on my door. She was a popular blogger who covered real estate and property rights issues, and she'd heard about my situation. "Mason, I've been tracking Linda Morrison for 2 years," she said, camera equipment in hand. "She's done this to dozens of people, but you're the first one with both the grounds to fight back and the guts to do it. Mind if I document this?" The next day brought escalation. Linda had hired 3 law firms to make her harassment look legitimate, and they discovered that the lead lawyer was her brother-in-law. That would have been bad enough, but then she cut off my water supply, claiming emergency pipe maintenance. For 5 days, I had no power and no water on a working ranch in the middle of a Texas summer. I had to haul water from Betty's place, keep my chickens alive with a generator I couldn't really afford to run 24/7, and sleep in the barn to manually fan the birds through the hottest nights. By day 5, I was at my breaking point. I'd lost $30,000 in chickens and supplies. My life savings was draining fast, and I hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight in days. I even called my ex-wife in desperation, swallowing my pride to ask for a loan. She laughed and hung up. That night, I found myself sitting by Grandpa's grave at 2 in the morning, Patton perched on the headstone like a guardian angel. "I can't do this," I told the grave marker. "I'm going to lose your ranch. I'm so sorry." I was exhausted, financially, drained, and emotionally broken. For a moment, just a moment, I thought about giving up, about taking Linda's insulting offer just to make it stop. That's when I opened the envelope Betty had given me, the one from Grandpa. Inside was an old survey map from 1952, covered in coffee stains and handwritten notes. I studied it by flashlight, comparing it to modern property lines. And that's when I noticed something odd. The boundaries seemed wrong somehow, like a piece was missing from the current maps. Bradley arrived the next morning to find me surrounded by old documents and county records I dug up online. "You look like hell," he said. Then his expression changed when he saw what I had found. "Mason, am I reading this right?" I showed him the discrepancy. I discovered the land where the Willow Creek HOA had built their $2 million headquarters wasn't on any of their official property deeds. According to the records, that land had belonged to the old Texas Rails Company, which went bankrupt in 1987. But there was no record of the land ever being sold. It had just been forgotten, abandoned. And then in 2008, the HOA had built their headquarters on it without actually owning it. Holy, Bradley whispered, they built their entire power base on land they don't own. Mason, do you understand what this means? We can buy that land. We can buy the land right out from under them. Grandpa didn't just leave me a ranch, I told Bradley, as we stared at the old map. He left me a ticking time bomb with a 30-year fuse. The revelation about the HOA's building sitting on abandoned railroad land changed everything. But we had to move fast. If Linda discovered what we knew, she'd find a way to legitimize her claim or bury us in legal proceedings until we ran out of money. Bradley immediately got on the phone with his contacts, trying to track down who actually held the rights to the old Texas Rails Company land. Meanwhile, I had to pretend everything was normal while Linda continued her campaign of terror. Next morning, Patton woke me with urgent crowing. I stumbled outside to find 10 trucks dumping cow manure around the perimeter of my property, not on it. Linda wasn't that stupid, but just close enough that the smell would make the ranch unlivable. The drivers claimed they were fertilizing the empty lot next door, but the message was clear. I spent the day moving my chickens again, this time to the far side of the property. As I worked, Rosa filmed everything, building what she called a case study in HOA tyranny. That evening, Betty brought over dinner and crucial information. I used to work for Linda, she said quietly. 5 years as her personal secretary before she fired me for refusing to notorize documents I knew were fraudulent. I kept copies of everything, just in case. And, Mason, there's something you need to know about why she hates your ranch so much. According to Betty, Linda had approached my grandfather in 2003 with an offer to buy his ranch. She'd had plans for a shopping center, investors, lined up everything. But Grandpa had taken one look at her plans, listened to her talk about modernizing the area, and told her exactly where she could stick her offer. He said, "This land has been feeding people since before you were born, Missy. It'll keep feeding them long after you're gone," Betty recalled. Linda begged, even got on her knees right there in his living room. But your grandfather wouldn't budge. She never forgave him for that humiliation. When she heard he'd passed and left the ranch to you, she saw her chance for revenge. The personal angle explained Linda's viciousness, but it also made her more dangerous. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Bradley's investigation hit pay dirt 2 days later. The heir to the Texas Rails Company rights was a man named Joseph Brooks living in Florida. He had no idea he owned land in Texas. Thought the company had sold everything off decades ago. When Bradley explained the situation, Joseph was shocked, but willing to sell. There was just one problem. He needed money for medical bills and wanted a quick sale. $100,000 cash. Deal. Closes in 48 hours. Take it or leave it. I had $20,000 in savings, and that was after selling everything I could. The ranch was already mortgaged to help pay for Grandpa's final expenses. Banks wouldn't lend to me because of the ongoing legal disputes with the HOA. I was desperate enough to literally get on my knees in the bank manager's office, a fellow veteran, begging for any kind of loan. Security had to escort me out. I sat on the curb outside, head in my hands, wondering how I'd come so far just to fail now. That's when Rose's video changed everything. She'd posted a compilation of Linda's harassment titled War Veteran Fights, HOA Mafia, and it exploded online. 5 million views in 6 hours. The comment section was full of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. And then something amazing happened. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign. Help Mason Save Paradise Ranch, it read. Within 24 hours, 10,000 people had donated, small amounts mostly, $10 here, $20 there, but it added up fast. Veterans donated with messages like "Seer Phi Brother," and from one soldier to another. People who'd lost homes to HOAs wrote things like, "HOA killed my dream too, and get a Marine." In 48 hours, we raised $150,000. I sat at my computer watching the number climb, tears streaming down my face. These strangers believed in my fight. They believed in justice. Linda must have gotten wind of something because she went into overdrive. She organized a rally of 50 Willow Creek residents to protest outside my ranch, claiming I was destroying their community. She filed false police reports saying I'd threatened her. She even tried to have animal control take my chickens, claiming they were a health hazard. But the crowdfunding campaign had done more than raise money. It had raised awareness. Reporters started showing up. Other victims of Linda's tactics came forward. The story was bigger than just my ranch now. It was about standing up to bullies, about communities supporting each other, about not letting the powerful crush the powerless. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, I had the money. Bradley and I drove through the night to Florida, met Joseph at his lawyer's office, and signed the papers at 11:59 p.m. As we drove back to Texas with the deed in hand, I thought about Grandpa's note. He'd known this day would come. He'd kept that old map for a reason, probably noticed the discrepancy years ago, but waited for the right moment. "Never sell Paradise Ranch," he'd written. Now I understood why. It wasn't just about keeping the land in the family. It was about being ready for the fight when it came. And now, with the deed to the land under the HOA building in my briefcase, I was ready to fight back. "You know what the best part is?" Bradley said as we crossed back into Texas. "Linda has no idea what's coming. She's so focused on destroying you that she hasn't bothered to check if her own house is in order." I smiled, thinking about the letter that would arrive at the HOA building tomorrow. 60 days, I said, for the sale of the land they sat on. News crews from 3 stations were there, and Rosa was live-streaming the whole thing to her million foal. That's what we'll give them. 60 days to vacate my property or pay rent. Bradley laughed. "This is going to be beautiful." The certified letter arrived at the HOA building at 9 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday morning. I know because Linda's shriek was so loud that people in the parking lot turned to stare. 20 minutes later, an ambulance arrived. Linda had fainted, hitting her head on her desk on the way down. While she was being checked for a concussion, Robert Morrison was frantically calling lawyers, each one telling him the same thing. The documentation was legitimate. They'd been squatting on railroad land for 15 years. Within hours, the Willow Creek HOA was in full panic mode. An emergency board meeting was called, and "Where did our dues go if not to buy the property?" yelled one tenant. Another demanded. "This is obviously a scam," Linda insisted, wearing a bandage on her forehead and appearing if she had aged 10 years in a single day. "Mason Rivers is trying to extort us. We've spent 15 years here. We are entitled to squatter rights." Bradley, who represented me at the meeting, got up and grinned. "Actually, Ma'am, adverse possession in Texas necessitates hostile, exclusive, and continuous possession for 30 years. You've only been here 15 times. You haven't paid property taxes since you can't pay taxes on land you don't own. Although it helps if you do." The room exploded. At once, 300 members called for Linda's resignation. The other 200 attempted to scream them down, most of them her friends who had profited from her reign of terror. Amidst the confusion, a few important truths surfaced. First, presuming it was part of a package deal that no one had bothered to check, the HOA had spent $2 million erecting the headquarters but had never really bought the land. Second, Linda had been accepting a $200,000 annual income as president, even though it was meant to be a volunteer role. Third, and maybe most detrimentally, she had been receiving kickbacks for each forced sale that she steered to her husband's development company. The audience quickly became ugly. A coffee cup was thrown by someone. As irate residents beat on their car, security had to remove Linda and Robert out the back door. Linda, however, was not going down easily. She hired new solicitors to countersue me for extortion and was able to temporarily keep her job by using obscure rules. She said the entire situation was a complex hoax and that I had falsified the documents. She planned a media campaign that portrayed me as a vindictive veteran who was going for a prosperous woman. It appeared for a week or so that she would genuinely make things better. She persuaded a judge who happens to be one of her golf friends to grant a temporary restraining order which prevented me from evicting the HOA while the case was being looked at. She told everybody who listened that I would soon be in jail as she strutted around town like she had won. At that point, she committed her greatest error. She increased the intensity of her attacks on my property after gaining a brief victory. One morning when I woke up, Patton was crowing wildly. Outside, someone had 3-foot-tall red lettering spray-painted across my barn. The tires on my truck were cut. Worse, several of my chicken coops had been opened during the night, and dozens of birds were missing. I found feathers and blood trails leading to the road. Security footage showed 3 men in masks doing the damage, but the police said without clear identification, there was nothing they could do. I knew Linda was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. For the first time since this started, I felt truly defeated. I sat in my vandalized barn, surrounded by empty coos, and wondered if fighting back was worth it. That's when Deputy Johnson stopped by with interesting news. Those 3 judges Linda always uses, Internal Affairs has been investigating them for 6 months. Seems they've been taking bribes. Guess whose name keeps coming up in the investigation? The tide turned quickly after that. The restraining order was thrown out when the judge who issued it was arrested for corruption. Without her judicial protection, Linda's house of cards started collapsing. The State Attorney General's office opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. Paradise Development LLC's records were subpoenaed. Suddenly, Linda wasn't strutting anymore. She called me at 3 in the morning, her voice slurred like she'd been drinking. "What do you want?" she said. "Just tell me what it'll take to make this go away. I'll pay anything." I told her it was too late for backdoor deals. The land was going to public auction in 30 days, and anyone could bid, including the HOA. "How am I supposed to come up with millions in 30 days?" she wailed. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you tried to destroy my life," I said, and hung up. The announcement of the auction sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. The HOA building wasn't just their headquarters, it was their identity. Without it, they'd have to meet in someone's living room, like a book club. More importantly, whoever owned the land would own the parking lot, the community pool, and the tennis courts they'd added over the years. All of it was built on railroad land they'd never legally acquired. Brad helped me set the terms. Auction in 30 days, starting bid of $2 million, cash only, payment due within 48 hours. It was aggressive, but legal. We posted notices in the local papers, online, and on a big sign right in front of the HOA building. The local news picked up the story. Veteran auctions, HOA's own land back to them. The irony was delicious and the internet loved it. Chicken justice started trending. Someone made T-shirts with Patton's picture and counterclockwise and proud written below. The morning of the auction, 300 people showed up at the Willow Creek tennis courts, which seemed like the perfect ironic venue hours. I wore my marine dress, blues for the occasion, not because I needed to prove anything, but because Grandpa would have wanted me to look my best while serving justice. Linda arrived in a black outfit that looked like she'd dressed for a funeral. which in a way she had. Her husband, Robert, was nowhere to be seen, and the gossip mills said he'd already filed for separation. She looked like she'd aged another 10 years in the past month, her usually perfect hair showing grey roots, her designer clothes replaced with off-the-rack hick basics. Bradley served as the auctioneer, and he'd done his homework. 5 serious bidders had registered, all real estate developers who saw an opportunity. The HOA had managed to scrape together their bid funds by demanding a special assessment from every member, $10,000 per household, non-negotiable. That had caused another wave of resignations, bringing their membership down to just 50 diehard supporters. They'd also sold off the community pool equipment, exercise machines from the gym, and everything else they could liquidate. According to Betty, who still had sources inside, they'd raised about $2 million total, probably hoping that would be enough since it was the starting bid. Linda sat in the front row, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white, surrounded by her remaining board members, who all looked like they were heading to their own executions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bradley announced, "we're here today to auction 1.5 acres of prime commercial real estate currently occupied by a building and various improvements. Starting bid is $2 million. Do I hear $2 million? Linda's lawyer raised his paddle immediately. $2 million from the Willow Creek HOA, Bradley confirmed. A developer in the back raised his hand. $2 million? Linda visibly flinched. Her lawyer countered, $2.2 million. The developer smiled. 2.5. You could see the panic spreading across Linda's face. She grabbed her lawyer's arm, whispering frantically. He shook his head. They didn't have it. Another developer jumped in. 2.6, then another. 2.7. Linda was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, just like I described in the beginning. Her kingdom was crumbling, and everyone was watching. That's when I stood up slowly, making sure everyone could see me. The crowd went silent. Rosa zoomed her camera in on my face. 2.8 million, I said clearly. And I'm exercising my right of first refusal as the adjacent property owner under Texas Property Code, Section 247.3b. The crowd gasped. Linda's lawyer jumped up. That's not valid. He can't do that. Bradley smiled. Lee, he can. As the owner of the adjacent Paradise Ranch and the land beneath this property, Mr. Rivers has the legal right to match any bid and claim priority. 2.88 million going once. No, Linda screamed, literally screamed. This isn't fair. He's stealing from us. Someone stop this. She tried to rush the podium, but her own board members held her back. Going twice, Bradley continued. Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. Sold to Mason Rivers for $2.8 million. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Cheers from those who'd been Linda's victims, boos from her remaining supporters. But I wasn't done with the theatrics. I walked to the podium and took the microphone from Bradley. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be clear about something. I don't want your building. I don't want your tennis courts or your pools. What I want is justice. I paused, letting that sink in. So, here's what's going to happen. In 90 days, I'll hold another auction. The starting bid will be $4 million. Only the Willow Creek HOA can participate, and you must pay in full with certified funds. Within 48 hours, the crowd went silent, processing what I'd said. I was going to make them buy their own building back at nearly double the price. $4 million? Someone shouted. That's extortion. I shook my head. No, that's market value for commercial real estate. With improvements. You should have bought the land legally 15 years ago. This is just correcting that mistake with interest. Linda was helped to an ambulance, having fainted again. Robert appeared just long enough to be served with divorce papers by a process server. Apparently, he'd beaten Linda to the punch. The remaining board members huddled together, already trying to figure out how to raise $4 million. Many residents were openly discussing dissolving the HOA entirely rather than pay another massive assessment. The empire Linda had built on threats and intimidation was crumbling in real time, and the entire thing was being broadcast live to millions. As the crowd dispersed, Betty approached me with another manila envelope. "Mason," she said quietly, "there's one more thing you should know. I found this in Linda's old files." Inside was a photo from 20 years ago showing Linda at my grandfather's ranch, on her knees in his living room, begging him to sell. The humiliation on her face was clear, even in the old photograph. Behind her stood a younger Robert looking embarrassed. On the back, someone had written, "The day Richard Rivers said no, I'll make them pay. Now I understood." This had never been about property values or community standards. This had been about revenge, about a woman who couldn't handle being told no by someone she considered beneath her. She'd spent 20 years nursing that grudge, waiting for her chance. Well, she'd gotten a chance, and look where it had led her. Deputy Johnson found me as I was leaving. "Just thought you should know," he said. "Linda's been calling around trying to hire some unsavory types. Nothing specific enough to arrest her for, but watch your back." I nodded, not surprised. Desperate people do desperate things, but I had Patton and 500 chickens watching my back, plus half the internet rooting for me. Linda had already lost. She just hadn't accepted it yet. As I drove home, I passed the HOA building one last time. Someone had already put up a banner under new management soon. I smiled, thinking about what Grandpa would say if he could see this. Probably something about chickens coming home to roost. The irony would have delighted him. Justice served with a side of poetic karma, just the way he liked it. The envelope Betty had given me contained more than just that old photo. There were letters, documents, a whole history of Linda Morrison's vendetta against my family. Apparently, after Grandpa rejected her, she'd tried everything, sending health inspectors, filing nuisance complaints, even trying to get the ranch condemned. But Grandpa had friends in the right places and a lawyer who knew how to fight back. Every attack had failed, making Linda more furious and more determined. When she became HOA president 8 years ago, she'd finally gained the power she needed to wage war on anyone who opposed her. My ranch had always been the ultimate target. But she'd practiced on 12 other families first, perfecting her tactics. Now, reading through these documents while sitting in Bradley's office, I understood I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for all of them. 3 days after the auction, Linda and her 5 remaining board members requested a meeting. They looked like a funeral procession walking into the conference room, black clothes, defeated expressions, moving like they were heading to their own execution. Linda had lost at least 20 lb. Her skin was grey and her hands shook as she sat down. The power suit was gone, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks that looked like they came from a discount store. The other board members weren't much better. These were people who ruled their little kingdom through fear and intimidation, and now they were the ones afraid. Bradley made them wait 45 minutes before we entered, a power play that would have made Linda proud in her better days. When we finally walked in, Linda's eyes were red from crying. "Mr. Rivers," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mason, please, I'm begging you." And then she did something I never expected. She got out of her chair and literally got on her knees. The other board members followed suit, all 6 of them kneeling on Bradley's expensive carpet like they were praying. "Please," Linda continued, tears streaming, "we'll do anything. The HOA will collapse without that building. People will lose everything they've invested. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but please don't destroy the whole community because of my mistakes." I let them kneel there for 5 full minutes, remembering that photo of her in the same position before my grandfather. The silence was deafening except for Linda's quiet sobs. Bradley looked at me, waiting for my cue. Artemy wanted to let them suffer longer, to really twist the knife, but then I heard Grandpa's voice in my head. The strong don't need to humiliate the weak son. Victory with honor. "Get up," I said, finally. "All of you sit down and listen." They scrambled back to their chairs. Hope flickering in their eyes, I laid out my terms slowly, making sure they understood every word. First, they would pay $5 million for the property, the true market value plus a premium for my trouble. Second, every current board member would resign immediately and be banned from serving in any HOA capacity for life. Third, they would pay me $500,000 in damages for the harassment, lost chickens, and emotional distress. Fourth, they would pay each of the 12 families they'd forced out over the years $100,000 in restitution. Fifth, they would erect a 3-foot bronze statue of a rooster in front of the building with a plaque reading "Paradise Ranch, where justice comes home to roost." In memory of Richard Rivers, he saw this coming. Sixth, Linda would record a detailed video apology admitting to all her wrongdoing. And seventh, this was the kicker, Linda would work at my ranch for 1 year. "Work at your ranch?" Linda's voice cracked. Doing what?" I smiled. "Managing the chicken coops, 5 a.m. start time. Every day, including weekends, minimum wage. You'll clean coops, collect eggs, feed the birds, and yes, deal with all that organic fertilizer you complained about. 1 year or the deal's off." Linda's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, humiliation, and finally, defeat. "But I don't know anything about chickens. I'm allergic to feathers. I have a bad back." Her protests were weak, and she knew it. This was her only option. Without this deal, she'd lose everything anyway and probably face criminal charges for the financial irregularities the investigation had uncovered. "Those are my terms," I said. "Take them or leave them. You have 1 hour to decide." They didn't need an hour. After 30 minutes of heated discussion in the hallway, they came back and agreed to everything. Linda's hand shook so badly as she signed the papers that her signature was barely legible. Each page she signed seemed to age her another year. When she got to the employment contract for the ranch, she broke down completely. "I used to make $200,000 a year," she whispered. "Now I'll be making what is minimum wage now, $15 an hour." Bradley nodded. $7.25 in Texas, actually, but Mr. Rivers is generously offering 15. It was brutal, but it was justice. Every family she'd destroyed had lost more than money. They'd lost their homes, their dreams, their sense of security. A year of minimum wage work seemed like a small price for what she'd done. The bronze rooster statue was installed a week later. 3 feet tall, wings spread, head thrown back in an eternal crow. It was magnificent. The plaque was even better than I'd imagined, and the dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people. Linda had to attend as part of our agreement. Wearing her new uniform, coveralls with Paradise Ranch embroidered on the back. She stood there as people took selfies with the statue, many of them her former victims, returning to see her downfall. The local news called it the most unusual corporate art installation in Texas. The internet called it the greatest revenge story ever told. But for me, it was closure. Grandpa had seen this coming, had prepared for it, and I'd finished what he couldn't. The statue wasn't just marking Linda's humiliation, it was honoring a man who'd stood his ground against a bully and won. Even from beyond the grave. 1 year later, I still wake up every morning to two sounds: Patton crowing his victory song and Linda sneezing from her chicken feather allergy. She shows up at 5 a.m. sharp, never a minute late, because she knows I'm watching. The woman who once terrorized an entire community now spends her days knee-deep in chicken coops, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some poetic justice in watching her trade her manicured nails for work gloves. But something unexpected happened over these 12 months. Linda actually became good at the job, really good. The chickens, who hated her at first, now follow her around like she's their mother. Patton, who used to chase her every morning, now perches on her shoulder while she works. Paradise Ranch has become something of a legend. We offer tours called Justice Rants Experience for $19 per person, with half the proceeds going to a Veterans Assistance Fund. People come from all over the country to see the famous bronze rooster, take pictures with Patton, and yes, catch a glimpse of the former HOA president shoveling chicken droppings. Rose's documentary series about our battle won 3 Emmys and sparked a nationwide conversation about HOA overreach. Patton has his own coffee table book, The Rooster That Defeated HOA, which somehow made the bestseller list. We've sold merchandise with Counterclockwise and Proud and pictures of Patent that funded a complete renovation of the ranch. Who knew? A rooster could be such a marketing genius. The transformation in Linda has been remarkable. She's gone from a size 2 to a size 16, but she's healthier than she's been in decades. The physical work, regular hours, and simple purpose have done what years of yoga and spa treatments couldn't. I hate to admit it, she told me last week, but I sleep better now than I have in 20 years. No anxiety medication, no wine to fall asleep, just good old-fashioned exhaustion. Her ex-husband, Robert, is serving 3 years for tax evasion. Turns out his development company was as crooked as Linda's HOA tactics. He wrote her from prison asking for forgiveness, but she just laughed and went back to collecting eggs. Karma really is she said, then added with a slight smile. And apparently so was I. The Willow Creek HOA still exists, but it's a shadow of its former self. They paid the $5 million for their building, mostly by selling off common areas and assets. The 12 families Linda had driven out each received their $100,000 in restitution, and most used it as down payments on new homes in neighborhoods without HOAs. The new board operates with complete transparency, term limits, and a rule that no violation can be issued without a 75% vote of all members. They meet monthly in the shadow of the bronze rooster, a constant reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. The Paradise Ranch Act, inspired by our case, passed the Texas legislature last month. It limits HOA power and provides stronger protections for property owners. Governor Abbott signed it while standing next to our famous rooster statue. The impact of the Paradise Veterans Center exceeded all my expectations. Take Tom Martinez, for instance, a Marine who served 3 tours in Iraq and came to us after his family found him standing on the Riverside Bridge at 3 in the morning, ready to jump. His sister had seen our story online and drove him straight to the ranch. That first morning, Tom couldn't even look at the chickens without shaking. Now, 6 months later, he runs our morning therapy sessions, teaching new veterans how to approach the birds slowly. Speak softly, let them come to you. The chickens don't care about your nightmares, he tells them. They just need you to be present here now. Feed them, water them, that's all. Watching him work with both the birds and the veterans, you'd never know he once thought death was his only option. I used my portion of the settlement to create the Paradise Veterans Center on the ranch. We provide free therapy, job training, and most importantly, chicken therapy for veterans dealing with PTSD. There's something about caring for chickens that grounds you, makes you focus on the present instead of the past. Grandpa knew it, and now 500 veterans a year discover it too. I married Rosa last spring in a ceremony at the ranch with Patton as the ring bearer. Yes, we trained him to carry a little pillow. Linda was invited and actually came bringing a handmade gift that shocked everyone. A beautiful wooden sign that reads Family Ranch, where heroes heal. She'd carved it herself during her off hours, apparently taking up woodworking as a hobby. The wedding reception became something even more special when all 12 families Linda had driven from their homes showed up. Dorothy Chen, the retired teacher, who'd lost her house over yellow door paint, approached Linda during the reception. The whole tent went quiet as this 70-year-old woman walked up to her former tormentor. Linda tensed, probably expecting anger or accusations. Instead, Dorothy opened her arms. "I forgive you," she said simply. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do." After Linda broke down completely, sobbing into Dorothy's shoulder while 11 other families gathered around them, it became this incredible moment of group healing, victims and perpetrator crying together, letting go of years of anger and pain. Rosa caught it all on camera, but we've never shared that footage. Some moments are too sacred for social media. As I stand here now watching the sun rise over Paradise Ranch, while 2 sets of twins, hope and justice, faith and victory, play in the yard, I think about how different life could have been if Linda had never tried to force me out. If I just sold and walked away, none of this would exist. The Veterans Center, the documentary that changed HOA laws nationwide, the thousands of people who found courage to stand up to their own bullies, none of it would have happened. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. Sometimes you have to fight for your paradise, and sometimes, just sometimes, the rooster wins. Patton crows again, and this time Linda echoes it with a laugh. "You know what?" she calls out from the coop. "I think I'm going to miss this when my year is up next month." Linda set down her egg basket and really looked at Patton, who was pining his feathers in the morning sun. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said. "I spent 20 years hating this place, hating your grandfather, hating these birds, but they never hated me back. Even when I was at my worst, the chickens just saw me as the lady with the feed bucket." She paused, watching a hen lead her chicks across the yard. "Your grandfather knew something I couldn't see. This ranch doesn't just raise chickens, it raises people back up when they've fallen. It raised you after the war. It's raising those veterans every day. And somehow it raised me too." And she looked at me directly. "I don't want to leave, Mason. Not because I have to stay, but because I finally understand what this place really is. It's not just a ranch, it's a second chance factory." I smile, thinking about the offer I'm going to make her. Stay on as a paid employee, help run the veterans program, use her organizational skills for good instead of evil. Redemption comes in strange forms sometimes. The bronze rooster stands guard at the HOA building, reminding everyone of how this all started. But here at Paradise Ranch, the real Patton struts around like he owns the place, which in a way he does. After all, he's the one who charged at Linda that first day, setting everything in motion. Maybe Grandpa trained him for just that moment. Or maybe, as I like to think, some roosters are just born knowing when to fight. The sun climbs higher, bathing the ranch in golden light. Somewhere in the distance, I hear a tour group arriving, eager to hear the story of how one man, one ranch, and one remarkable rooster took down an H. And you know what? It never gets old in the telling.